The escape was no fluke. Considering their small size, honey badgers have remarkably big brains.
The intelligence is just beyond anything.
In the blistering Kalahari depth, a pride of lions corners a solitary 30-pound shadow. By every rule of nature, this is a slaughter. But the predators hesitate. Why? Because that shadow doesn't care about the laws of biology. It doesn't care about claws, venom, or the concept of fear itself. This isn't just an animal. It's nature's ultimate rogue, a creature built so impossibly tough that scientists had to rewrite the rulebook on survival. Welcome to the not-so-normal world of the honey badger. Venom immunity, under the microscope. Before anything else, we look at the badger's favorite snack first. The honey badger doesn't just occasionally bump into venomous snakes, it actively hunts them for dinner. We are talking about the ultimate rogues gallery of the reptile world, the black mamba, the king cobra, and the puff adder. For any other creature on the planet, a single drop of their venom means an agonizing, fast-tracked ticket to the afterlife. But for the honey badger, it's just a spicy appetizer. For decades, onlookers watched in absolute disbelief as honey badgers took full-force bites directly to the face from highly lethal, neurotoxic snakes. The badger would occasionally pass out, looking for all the world like a goner, only to wake up 2 hours later, stretch, shake off the dirt, and finish chewing on the snake that just bit it. For a long time, the scientific community assumed this was just a myth, an exaggeration told around safari campfires. How could any mammal survive a dose of neurotoxin that could easily drop an adult African elephant? The answer was finally uncovered when researchers decided to peer into the honey badger's very DNA. What they found wasn't just a strong immune system, it was a literal hard-coded genetic cheat code. To understand how it works, you have to look at how neurotoxic venom kills. Normally, when a cobra bites an animal, the venom releases alpha neurotoxins. These toxins rush through the bloodstream like tiny microscopic cruise missiles targeting very specific docking bays called nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. These receptors are responsible for telling your muscles to move and, crucially, telling your lungs to breathe. When the venom docks into these receptors, it locks them down, blocking the chemical signals from the brain. The result is rapid systemic paralysis. The diaphragm stops moving, the lungs fail, and the victim suffocates while completely conscious. But when scientists mapped the honey badger's acetylcholine receptors, they noticed something wild. The docking bays were physically altered. Through millions of years of evolutionary warfare, the honey badger's receptors had mutated, shifting their shape and acquiring a distinct molecular charge. When the cobra's neurotoxin arrives to lock down the system, it physically cannot latch onto the receptor. It's like trying to shove a square peg into a round hole or trying to use a key on a lock that has been completely welded shut. The venom simply bounces off the cells, harmlessly floating away into the bloodstream. However, the badger isn't completely untouchable. When bitten by a massive snake, a staggering amount of cytotoxins and neurotoxins still flood its body. This is where that famous cobra nap comes into play. The sheer volume of venom causes a massive drop in blood pressure and induces a temporary comatose state as its liver and metabolic systems work at hyperspeed to neutralize and filter out the cellular damage. It's a brutal, exhausting internal battle, but the badger's biochemistry is so ridiculously robust that it wins every single time. It wakes up from a lethal dose of venom with nothing more than a mild hangover and a massive appetite. Surviving a lethal injection is one thing, but how do you walk away from a physical mauling completely unscathed? The living shield. If you were to design a suit of biological armor, you would probably think of a turtle's shell or an armadillo's plates, rigid, hard, and impenetrable. But nature took a completely different approach with the honey badger, opting for something much more terrifying. A fluid, kinetic defense system that defies the laws of physical combat. Scientists refer to it as a marvel of evolutionary engineering, but visually, it looks less like a shield and more like a loose, rubbery sack of muscle that simply refuses to let weapons reach what's inside. The first line of defense is the sheer, ridiculous thickness of the skin itself. A honey badger's hide can measure up to 6 millimeters thick around its neck and back. To put that into perspective, that is thicker than the skin of a wild boar, an animal nearly 10 times its size, and comparable to the heavy-duty leather hide of a buffalo. It is dense, fibrous, and packed with layers of collagen that act like a natural Kevlar vest. When a domestic dog, a jackal, or even a porcupine tries to pierce this layer, their teeth and quills find absolutely no purchase. The hide simply absorbs the impact energy and spreads the force across the body, leaving the underlying tissue untouched. But the real magic happens right beneath that thick skin. In most mammals, the skin is tightly bound to the underlying muscle and connective tissue by a web of fascia. This keeps everything secure and compact. The honey badger, however, has an incredibly loose, highly elastic subcutaneous layer. There is so much slack in their hide that it behaves like a separate entity entirely. If a massive African leopard slaps its heavy paws down and grabs a honey badger firmly by the scruff of its neck, the classic universally lethal kill grip of the cat world, the badger doesn't panic. Instead, it utilizes its liquid physics. Because the skin is so loose, the honey badger can literally twist, turn, and rotate 180 degrees inside its own body casing. While the leopard is holding on to what it thinks is a paralyzed, pinned throat, the badger's muscular core spins around within that rubbery skin bag. Suddenly, the leopard isn't holding a helpless prey item. It is staring down a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth and claws, launching a furious, blinding counterattack directly into its eyes and nose. It is a psychological horror show for an apex predator, forcing them to let go just to protect their own face. This loose armor is also completely impervious to smaller, everyday nuisances. A honey badger can walk directly into a swarming, furious nest of African killer bees to rob them of their honey and larvae. Thousands of bees will descend upon it, pumping venom that would easily cause systemic shock and death in a human being. The badger barely notices. The stings cannot penetrate the thick dermis, and the few that do hit areas like the nose are neutralized by the badger's insane, baseline anti-inflammatory tolerance. Even a direct swing from a human wielding a machete has been known to slide right off their back without breaking the skin. Armor is useless if you don't have the weaponry to back it up. Claws, jaws, and chemical warfare. To complement a body wrapped in liquid Kevlar, evolution equipped the honey badger with an offensive arsenal that is nothing short of a walking Swiss Army knife designed for demolition. If you were to scale up its physical weaponry to the size of a grizzly bear, it would be an apocalyptic force. As it stands, at just 2.5 feet long, this creature possesses the mechanical leverage to systematically dismantle its environment, pierce through steel-hard defenses, and deploy chemical-biological weapons when things get crowded. Let us start with the front lines of its anatomy. The foreclaws. A honey badger sports a set of 5 curved, structurally reinforced claws on each front paw that can grow up to 2 inches in length. Proportionally, these are massive. They are not sharp like a cat's for slicing meat. They are thick, heavy-duty mattocks built for extreme subterranean excavation. Powered by exceptionally dense shoulder muscles and an elongated scapula that provides maximum mechanical advantage, these claws can tear through sun-baked African clay that is as hard as concrete. If a honey badger wants to get to a rodent hiding 3 feet underground, it doesn't just dig. It essentially liquefies the earth, throwing up plumes of dirt and tunneling out of sight in less than a minute. In fact, their digging power is so formidable that they routinely claw their way through the thick, cement-like mud walls of macro-termite mounds, a feat that leaves other predators scratching at the surface in vain. But what happens when those claws uncover a meal wrapped in an impenetrable shell? That is where the jaw mechanics come into play. For an animal of its size, the honey badger possesses a crushing bite force that defies standard mammalian ratios. This is achieved through a highly modified, deeply grooved skull structure that accommodates massive temporalis muscles. Its teeth are incredibly dense, with thick enamel designed to withstand high-impact crunching without fracturing. A honey badger can capture a geometric tortoise, a reptile protected by a highly calcified, rigid carapace, and simply crunch through the shell like a human eating a potato chip. They routinely snap and chew up the thickest bones of their prey, consuming everything down to the marrow, leaving absolutely zero waste behind. Then, there is the secret weapon that catches everyone off guard: their anal scent glands. If a honey badger finds itself momentarily overwhelmed by a pack of hyenas or a pride of lions, it doesn't just rely on its teeth and loose skin. It deploys an absolute biohazard. Tucked away at the base of its tail is a pair of highly developed pouches that can blast an incredibly pungent, suffocatingly foul liquid. Unlike a skunk, which uses its spray to deter attackers from a distance, the honey badger uses its stinky cloud as a localized, suffocating smokescreen. The smell is described by researchers as a sickening mix of burning rubber, rotting sulfur, and concentrated ammonia. The odor is so profoundly overwhelming that it can literally asphyxiate bees inside their own hive, causing them to drop clear out of the air. And it sends apex predators into fits of gagging and watery eyes, buying the badger all the time it needs to stroll away. Yet, their most lethal weapon isn't part of their anatomy. It is locked behind their eyes. The mind-bending intelligence of Stoffel and friends. When you look at a honey badger's low-slung, stocky build, it is easy to mistake them for pure, unadulterated muscle with zero room for higher brain function. They look like simple brawlers. But behind that flat, white-striped skull lies an intelligence that completely breaks the standard behavioral models for the mustelid family. While most carnivores rely purely on instinct, speed, or brute force to solve problems, honey badgers possess a chillingly analytical brain. They don't just react to their environment, they manipulate it. This capacity for complex reasoning and innovative problem-solving places them in an elite club of animal geniuses historically thought to include only primates, cetaceans, and crows. To truly understand the depths of this intelligence, you have to look at the legendary case of Stoffel, a rescued honey badger living at the Moholoholo Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in South Africa. Stoffel became a global scientific sensation because he treated top-tier, human-engineered security infrastructure like a personal playground. The staff initially put him in a standard fenced enclosure, but he casually dug his way under the mesh in minutes. To stop him, the center built a massive, custom-designed brick-walled camp with deep concrete foundations. Stoffel looked at the walls and immediately began his career as an escape artist. He started by scanning his environment for structural weaknesses. Finding none, he turned to tool use, a behavior that requires abstract thinking, planning, and an understanding of cause and effect. When a caretaker forgot a broom inside the enclosure, Stoffel didn't just play with it. He dragged it across the compound, wedged it vertically into a corner, and used it as a ladder to scale the wall. The caretakers took the broom away. The next day, Stoffel gathered large rocks from around his enclosure, rolled them over to the wall one by one, and systematically stacked them into a crude but functional stone staircase to climb out. The researchers, absolutely baffled, cleared all the loose rocks out of the enclosure. Stoffel didn't care. He waited for a heavy rainstorm, gathered the wet, clay-heavy mud from the ground, rolled it into tight, solid mud balls, and left them in the sun to bake and harden into makeshift bricks. Once they were solid, he stacked his homemade bricks against the wall and escaped again. Over the years, he used everything from overhanging tree branches to rakes left by volunteers. He even figured out how to unlock the complex latching mechanism of his cage door by reaching his claws through the bars and manipulating the bolt.
He would get the female to go up. She would go up, open the first gate. He'd hold the gate and say, "Woman, get up. I'm pulling open, you open up." She goes up to the top, she pulls the second one out. He waits for her to get down and they escape together.
He wasn't escaping because he was hungry. He was escaping because he enjoyed the intellectual challenge. This high-level cognition is seen in the wild as well. Honey badgers have been observed tracking humans and other predators not to attack them, but to use them as scouts to find food. They will actively monitor the movements of smaller digging predators like jackals, waiting for the perfect moment to ambush the prey that flees from the jackal's dig site. They understand geometry, spatial awareness, and leverage, allowing them to pry open heavy logs or wedge rocks under obstacles to unearth hidden nests. They don't just brute force their way through life, they outthink it. This relentless brain requires an astronomical amount of fuel to keep running. The insatiable metabolic furnace. To power a brain that functions like a mechanical engineer and a body wrapped in liquid Kevlar, the honey badger requires a staggering amount of energy. This animal is cursed with a hyper-accelerated metabolic furnace that burns through calories at a frantic, almost unsustainable rate. Because of this, the honey badger lives its life in a state of permanent, restless urgency. It does not possess the luxury of a lion, which can feast on a zebra and sleep it off for 3 days under a tree. If a honey badger stops hunting, its engine stalls. Consequently, it spends up to 20 hours a day in a perpetual high-speed jog, nose glued to the dirt, digging up everything that moves. And when we say everything, we mean it. The honey badger is an opportunistic omnivore with a menu that reads like a horror movie script. Its diet includes scorpions, whose stingers it casually chews off, venomous centipedes, rodents, bird eggs, roots, berries, and frogs. If it encounters a juvenile crocodile in a drying riverbed, it will attack it. If it finds a human grave that hasn't been buried deep enough, its powerful claws have been known to excavate the site, a macabre habit that earned it a terrifying reputation in certain rural regions of Asia and Africa. It eats its prey whole, consuming fur, feathers, venom glands, and bones, deriving every single joule of energy it can squeeze out of the matter. Then, of course, there is the literal honey. The honey badger's scientific name, Mellivora capensis, translates directly to honey eater of the Cape. It has a deep, obsessive addiction to beehives, but it isn't actually looking for the sweet honey. It is targeting the highly nutritious, protein-dense bee larvae hidden inside the comb. It will tolerate thousands of stings, blinding swarms, and choked airways just to rip a hive to shreds and gorge on the grubs. For nearly 2 centuries, naturalists perpetuated a beautiful, Disney-like story to explain how the badger finds these hidden hives. The legend goes that a small African bird called the greater honey guide, indicator, flies through the canopy, spots a beehive, and sings a specific, chattering song to get the honey badger's attention. The badger then follows the bird to the hive, tears it open with its massive claws, eats the larvae, and leaves the remaining beeswax for the bird, which cannot open the hive on its own. It was celebrated as the ultimate example of interspecies teamwork. However, modern field studies have thrown a massive wrench into this heartwarming tale. When biologists actually tracked honey badgers using radio collars over thousands of hours, they noticed a hilarious reality. Honey badgers almost completely ignore the honey guide birds. In fact, honey badgers are notoriously hard of hearing and have terrible eyesight. They are far too focused on their own frantic digging to look up at a tiny bird fluttering in the trees. The symbiotic partnership is largely a one-way street. The bird is indeed an expert at finding hives, and it does follow honey badgers around, knowing that the destructive little tanks will inevitably leave a trail of broken hives in their wake. The bird isn't guiding the badger, it's simply stalking a chaotic force of nature and cleaning up the crumbs. While the African variety gets all the fame, the badger's empire stretches across continents. Subspecies from India to the Arabian Peninsula. When people picture a honey badger, they almost always conjure up images of the African savanna, a dusty landscape where the creature faces down lions and hyenas. But this is a massive understatement of their actual ecological footprint. The honey badger is not just a localized African phenomenon. It is a highly successful, globally distributed syndicate. Its evolutionary blueprint is so efficient that it has successfully adapted to some of the most unforgiving environments on Earth, spanning from the dense jungles of southern Asia to the bone-dry, scorching expanses of the Arabian Peninsula. Across this vast geographic empire, scientists recognize up to 12 distinct subspecies of Mellivora capensis. While they all share the same baseline zero-care attitude and structural mechanics, local environmental pressures have shaped their sizes, color patterns, and hunting strategies in fascinating ways. Take, for instance, the Indian honey badger, Mellivora capensis indica, also known locally as the biju. If you were to spot one moving through the scrub forests of India, or the foothills of the Himalayas, you would immediately notice a striking visual difference. Unlike their African cousins, who proudly rock a bright snow-white cape that runs from their forehead all the way down to their tail, the Indian variant sports a much more muted, grizzled gray-white coat. Their white stripe is less defined, fading into a smoky, dark ash color along the flanks. This isn't just an accidental paint job, it is a specialized camouflage upgrade. The Indian honey badger operates in regions with heavy tree canopy and dense, shadows-heavy undergrowth. A bright, neon-white back would make them stick out like a sore thumb to large predators like leopards and Bengal tigers. Furthermore, because India features a high density of burrowing rodents and deep-dwelling cobras, the Indian subspecies has developed slightly longer, more slender forelimbs. They are built less like a wide, heavy tank and more like an agile underground excavator, capable of snaking through tight mud tunnels and rock crevices that would trap an African badger. Shift your focus west toward the Middle East, and you encounter the Arabian honey badger, Mellivora capensis pumilio. Here, in the blistering deserts of Oman, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia, the animal faces an entirely different set of rules. Water is practically non-existent, and daytime temperatures routinely soar past 120 degrees Fahrenheit. To survive this hellish oven, the Arabian honey badger underwent a dramatic downsizing. It is significantly smaller and lighter than its African counterpart, weighing in at just 15 to 18 pounds. This smaller body mass is a brilliant adaptation for heat dissipation. Less bulk means less thermal energy retained. It also allows them to survive on a highly restricted caloric intake. Instead of hunting large monitors or heavy puff adders, the Arabian badger has adapted to become a master desert forager. It will spend hours delicately flipping over sun-baked rocks to harvest scorpions, beetles, and desert geckos, extracting every single drop of hydration from the moisture found inside its prey's bodies. It has also shifted its schedule entirely, becoming strictly nocturnal during the peak summer months, spending its days resting deep inside cool, self-dug underground bunkers. A creature this disruptive was bound to catch the attention of human history. The human intersections. Long before internet memes declared that the honey badger doesn't care, ancient human civilizations had already run into this absolute wrecking ball of an animal and reached the exact same conclusion. Humans have spent millennia trying to figure out what to do with a creature that refuses to acknowledge human authority, fear, or basic property lines. As a result, the honey badger has carved its way deeply into global mythology, indigenous medicine, modern pop culture, and even the high-tech world of military engineering. In various African cultures, the honey badger's legendary resilience made it a potent symbol of spiritual and physical protection. For instance, among certain tribal hunters of the Kalahari and the Congo, it was traditional to harvest the skin or claws of a honey badger to create powerful protective talismans. Warriors would wear these charms into battle, believing the honey badger's unbreakable spirit, thick skin, and refusal to surrender would magically transfer to them under enemy fire. Conversely, there was also a deep-seated taboo against eating honey badger meat before a hunt or battle. Elders feared that consuming the animal would make a warrior so irrationally aggressive and single-minded that they would ignore tactical formations and rush blindly into an ambush. Moving into the 21st century, humanity found a new way to weaponize the honey badger's identity through advanced military hardware. When engineers look at an animal that is heavily armored, low to the ground, capable of operating in extreme terrain, and virtually impossible to kill, they don't just see an animal, they see a blueprint for a combat vehicle. During the late 20th century, the South African military developed a legendary wheeled infantry fighting vehicle designed to withstand the brutal terrain of the sub-Saharan bush and survive heavy landmine blasts. Its official name, the ratel, which is the Afrikaans word for honey badger.
South Africans have developed an incredibly versatile infantry fighting vehicle known as the ratel, the Afrikaans word for the fiery little African honey badger of Robert Ruark fame.
Just like its biological namesake, the ratel APC became world famous for its near-indestructible chassis, high mobility, and its ability to punch way above its weight class in intense combat zones. Similarly, in modern small arms design, the United States military and various special operations forces adopted a highly compact, suppressed assault rifle designed for ultra-aggressive close-quarters infiltration. The firearm was dubbed the Honey Badger. The choice of name was purely intentional. The weapon was engineered to be small, incredibly loud and violent when unsuppressed, reliable under the filthiest conditions, and capable of tearing through defenses with brutal efficiency. Even in the digital age, the honey badger remains a massive cultural icon. When a viral video in the early 2010 highlighted the animal's chaotic lifestyle, it resonated with millions of people worldwide. The phrase, "honey badger don't care," became a global corporate and cultural philosophy, adopted by professional athletes, politicians, and everyday people as a mantra for resilience, thick-skinned independence, and an absolute refusal to let critics or obstacles slow you down. Humanity has realized that we cannot tame this animal, we cannot break its spirit, and we cannot force it to comply. The best we can do is stand back, admire its chaotic genius, and name our toughest inventions after it. With a reputation for absolute invincibility, what actually keeps a honey badger up at night? The only things they fear, true threats to the throne. When an animal treats a pride of lions like a minor inconvenience and treats a black mamba like a light snack, it's easy to assume it sits entirely outside the laws of mortality. The internet has painted the honey badger as a flawless, immortal video game character with God mode enabled. But out in the raw, unforgiving wild, nature always maintains a balance. The honey badger is incredibly tough, yes, but it is not immortal. There are very real, very lethal checks on its power, and when its luck runs out, the end is often swift and brutal. The most prominent natural check on the honey badger comes from apex big cats, specifically experienced leopards and lions. While a young, naive lion might get intimidated by a honey badger's screaming, foul-scented counterattack, a mature, seasoned predator knows the secret to breaking the badger's defense. It all comes down to stamina and physics. Because the honey badger has a hyper-accelerated metabolism, it exhausts its energy reserves quickly during a prolonged, high-intensity fight. A large male leopard, weighing 3 times more than the badger, will systematically avoid the badger's snapping jaws and long front claws, using its weight to pin the badger to the ground. Once the badger is exhausted and cannot rotate inside its skin any longer, the cat will apply a crushing bite directly to the skull or the back of the neck, using sheer jaw pressure to fracture the dense bone. It is an exhausting, dangerous chore for the feline, often resulting in severe facial wounds, but a hungry, desperate apex predator will absolutely get the job done. Beyond big cats, the honey badger faces a silent, suffocating threat from the reptilian underworld, the African rock python. While the badger can easily shrug off the neurotoxic venom of a cobra, venom is entirely useless against 20 feet of pure, constricting muscle. If a honey badger stumbles into the striking zone of a massive python, the snake doesn't bother biting to inject poison. It wraps its heavy, coiled body around the badger's torso. Every time the honey badger exhales, the python tightens its grip. The badger's famous loose skin offers zero protection against this uniform, crushing pressure. Within minutes, the python overrides the badger's respiratory system, suffocating the creature before swallowing it whole. Yet, its most devastating and unnatural enemy is the exact same one faced by almost every species on Earth: humanity. Honey badgers are notoriously destructive neighbors. Because they have high-level intelligence and a complete lack of fear, they routinely invade human infrastructure. They will tear through the wire mesh of chicken coops, slaughtering entire flocks of livestock in a single night. They will systematically smash commercial beehives to get to the larvae, costing local farmers thousands of dollars in lost honey production. Because of this financial damage, humans have waged a quiet, brutal war against them. Traditional fences cannot stop a honey badger, so angry farmers turn to much deadlier methods. They deploy heavy-duty steel jaw traps, set up poisoned baits, and use tracking dogs to hunt them down. In many parts of their range, habitat fragmentation, the breaking up of wilderness for roads and cities, forces honey badgers into smaller, isolated pockets of land. For an animal that needs to jog miles every single day just to feed its insane metabolic furnace, this loss of territory is a slow death sentence. Behind the memes lies nature's ultimate, unbreakable survivor, a masterclass in attitude and evolution. If you want to unlock more mind-blowing secrets of the wild, hit that subscribe button now.